Hi, everyone. This is Mike Oneman, Principal Voice User Interface Designer at Angel.com. And today we're going to be talking about our concept called the Caller Bill of Rights, which is our alternative to a hard and fast set of voice user interface standards. And I'll talk more about what that means as we go through the slides. So I'm going to start with an overview of Angel.com, and this isn't meant to be a sales presentation, and we're not going to bore you with a whole bunch of slides about Angel, but I wanted to start with a few things here. So our system is built on patented IVR technology with 25 or more patents granted. We have over 1,600 customers in 20 different industries, including some of the logos you see here. We have over 10,000 applications deployed, and the point is, what we've learned from all these things is that people hate IVRs. So maybe I should actually correct myself and say people hate bad IVRs. And everyone can probably come up with a picture in their head of a bad IVR experience. Almost everybody has one, I'm sure. And you know, some of the things we think about are IVRs that ask you to repeat information over and over again. You know, you provide the account information once in the IVR, and then you're asked to repeat that again if you talk to an agent later. Or maybe you're made to listen to several minutes of garbage before you're even able to talk about, you know, why you called. Or maybe you called an application and you're transferred to a call center only to find out that they're closed for the day. Or, you know, you wait forever and finally get to an agent and realize it's the wrong agent, and you're bounced from one agent to another. Or maybe you're bounced from one IVR system to another. Or, you know, worst case, the IVR system might even just hang up on you. You know, I've called IVRs where I make the wrong choice, and the next thing I know, it's telling me I did something invalid, and it hangs up on me. So these are just some of the many things that can define a bad IVR system. And at Angel, we've pioneered the concept of caller first, which, you know, means exactly what it says. We're trying to put the callers first in everything we do. So when we design a new application, we always need to be thinking about what the callers need from that application and what their goals are when they call in. So a good caller first application knows who you are, it can cater to your preferences, it understands your needs, and it respects your time. And ultimately, it's able to serve you quickly and efficiently. And that's the goal for every IVR we design here. Now, when we talk about the Caller First Bill of Rights, recently I was interviewed for an article in a major industry publication, and the article was about this long debated topic of a set of VUI standards and whether or not we should standardize different things about voice user interfaces, such as the commands you can speak to get to a representative, or the way in which you ask, you know, a yes/no question, or different kinds of questions. And it's been a big debate for many years. And it turns out I actually agreed with some of the other people who were interviewed. And you know, my take is that I'm skeptical about the concept of trying to standardize these types of things. And the reason is I don't believe that the problem lies with designers. I think that voice user interface designers with a little bit of experience, they know intuitively what we should and shouldn't be doing for our callers. You know, I think we know that you should ask questions in a clear and concise way and do all the right things to make sure that this is a painless experience. But I think what happens is the decision makers at the companies, where the customers that we design these applications for, I don't think they're educated well enough to make the right decisions all the time. And the bottom line is, when a designer has to build a system that somebody's paid a lot of money for, you know, if that person wants to have 20 different nested menus that never lead to an agent, you know, ultimately we can only push back so hard until they can just go to someone else to build that application. And I think what happens is designers don't necessarily have the tools to convince customers to do the right thing. And we're hoping that this Bill of Rights is, you know, not only something that designers should think about when they design an application, but also a set of tools that they can use to convince customers to do the right thing. So this is aimed at the decision makers as much as it's aimed at the designers. And so rather than try to standardize something that is very hard to standardize because there's always different cases and different use cases for everything. I think it's very hard to have a hard and fast set of standards, but I do think this Bill of Rights will help give the tools to designers to do the right thing. So I'm going to get right into it here. Now the first item is callers have the right to have clear expectations set about what the IVR can and can't do for them. So when you call in, you might be calling an IVR with a single purpose. If you imagine calling an IVR that helps you activate your prescription savings card, that IVR does one thing, and it can tell you up front exactly what it's going to do for you and get you started and convince you to play along and hopefully gain your trust right away by setting your expectations up front. Other IVRs have multiple purposes. There may be many things the IVR can do. And for those, you need to clearly set expectations about all the things it can do for you with a clearly worded menu or a description of what it can do. The idea is not to trap callers into layer upon layer of menus with no apparent way out. And we see this often where callers feel like they're trapped in automation and they don't know whether the command that's presented is actually the one they need or whether they should wait for a command 10 menus down the tree. And it's very hard to know whether or not that IVR is actually going to be able to help you. And what happens is callers end up frantically trying to figure out the magic set of buttons they can press to get to an agent. And as we've seen, as soon as callers become confused, they stop trusting the IVR. And when you don't trust it, you're not going to play along, and that's one more caller that you've lost. So if we can gain callers' trust up front by setting clear expectations, we can increase both caller satisfaction and containment. Now the second right is the right to have honest expectations set about whether or not live help is available. Now, we understand that not every application is able to offer a live representative. Not every business has live representatives standing by at all hours of the day, anytime somebody might call in. And an example I like to talk about that kind of parallels our IVR world is the ATM. Now the ATM is automated teller machine. It's obviously an automated system, and there's no live person behind the glass there. But callers know that if they're there during business hours, they do have the option of going into a branch if they need to do something that the ATM can't handle, like taking out a loan or something like that. But they also know that if they walk up to that ATM outside of business hours, there's no one there to help them. They've made the choice to use automation, and that's the only choice. And there can be IVR systems with, that follow the same paradigm. And at Angel, we talk about the concept of a call containment continuum. And every application falls somewhere on this continuum, with the far extreme on the left being a high-touch IVR that might not even feel like an IVR. Callers might call in, and there might be something going on in the background. They're using data to drive a transfer to a certain representative based on the caller type. And you might not even know there's an IVR there. So we call that a very high-touch IVR, a very extreme end of the continuum. On the other end is sort of the IVR equivalent to the ATM example I talked about, where you call in and you've reached an automated system, and you can either choose to use automation or not, but there's no representatives available. And there are cases where that can work. Now, the key, though, no matter where you sit on this continuum, is that the IVR should not keep secrets. So if there is an agent available, you should allow people to transfer to those agents. There's many IVRs where there are agents there. There are people you can transfer to, but the IVR makes it very hard for you to actually get out and get to those agents. And I believe if you follow the first rule we talked about, which was setting clear expectations, people will eventually learn to make the right choice about whether or not to use automation. If they know that the IVR can handle the task they called in about, they'll choose to use automation rather than transferring to an agent. But if they know the IVR can't handle their task, they're going to want to be able to press 0 or say agent and get right out to a live person. And that's where the IVR needs to be honest and let them get to an agent. Conversely, if representatives are not available, it still needs to be honest. But the IVR should then be telling callers why live help isn't available, and even more importantly, tell them how they can get help. Maybe it's calling back during business hours, or maybe they can leave a message and somebody will call them back when they're available. The key here, again, be honest. Make sure that if there's a reason for not having agents, you can articulate that to callers. And if you can't, or if there's a reason where you need to hide the fact that you don't have representatives or agents available, then maybe you need to rethink your business rules, and maybe you've made the wrong decision not to have agents available. So again, it's about gaining callers' trust. I think if we follow all these 10 rules, but starting with these first two, setting expectations and being honest about live help, I think we can gain callers' trust right away, up front in the call, and make automation the obvious choice when it's appropriate for the task. Now, the next right callers have is the right to be in complete control of the interaction from start to finish. And we know that a well-designed IVR system, its job is to lead callers down a path. But we need to lead callers down that path without forcing them and without bullying them. Many IVR systems feel like they take control of the interaction, and callers very quickly feel trapped. And again, this is something that will cause them to frantically try to find the command to get out to an agent, because they feel like they're not in control of how they navigate through this IVR system. So an example is letting callers decide when to repeat information, or when to pause and when to continue. So you don't want to bombard callers with a very long introductory prompt up front, or a very long legal disclaimer, or a message about how great your website is, or how great your latest product is. Those aren't the kinds of things callers want to hear, unless they ask for it. You can give them the option to hear those kinds of things, and if they choose it, then you've got an engaged caller who wants to hear the message you play for them. And letting callers decide when they should repeat, a confirmation number rather than playing it 4 times to make sure they got it. Or, if a caller is supposed to enter or say their credit card number, you might give them a moment to get their credit card out, but then you tell them, when you have it, say, I'm ready. You don't just wait for 5 minutes and figure it could take 5 minutes to get the credit card out. I mean, that's a very obvious example, but we need to make sure that callers feel like they're in control at all times. So the goal here is to ask pointed questions and do lead callers down a path, because that's the job of the IVR, to lead callers in the right direction. But let callers decide how fast and how and when to proceed down that path. Now the fourth right is the right to a consistent experience throughout their interaction with your IVR system. Now, I like to talk about this brand on the right. I like to talk about cars. Now, this is a Porsche 911. And you can see from the pictures here, the first picture is a car that's 30 years old. That's a Porsche 911 from the late 70s. The one on the bottom is, from last year, I believe. And when you look at those two cars, whether or not you're into cars, it's unmistakable that is made by the same group of people. Those are both made by Porsche. And for 30 years, they have managed to stay consistent to that brand, even though they've evolved over time. Now, your IVR can learn from this example. Your IVR should be using consistent style and tone and language throughout an application. And when we talk about extending your company's brand through the IVR, companies spend millions and millions and millions of dollars making sure that you have a certain feel when you think of their company. You understand their brand innately, and they build TV advertisements around that, and they create logos, and they make sure that you really know what they want you to know about who they are. Now, the IVR is one of the largest touch points that companies have with their customers. So why shouldn't you spend a similar amount of effort making sure to extend that brand into the IVR experience? So for a given application, you really should be thinking about recording all prompts using the same voice talent and the same coaching style. And you want to avoid these applications, which we hear all the time, where maybe the questions are asked in one voice, and then if it has to confirm my phone number back to me, that's another voice that comes in. And if I'm transferred to an agent, maybe a third voice comes in and transfers me. There's no reason for that. That totally takes away from the feel I have of a company. And it makes me feel like I'm in this disjointed sort of pieced together IVR system, and it loses my trust. As I mentioned, we want to keep callers' trust in order to get them to play along with the IVR. Now, there can be places where there can be applications where you do want to have different voices from one application to the next. Maybe you have a very different goal for one application that you're transferring to from another. And in that case, that's okay. You can have different voices, but you need to be deliberate about that. Make a deliberate decision to have two different voices and make a handoff between the application, just like a human would, from one human to the next. You would hand somebody off and say, okay, I'm going to transfer you over to the billing representative now, and she's going to help you from now on. So again, the IVR is one of your largest touch points for your customers, and you need to brand it appropriately and think about it appropriately. Keep callers' experience consistent, and don't piece it together over time. Now, the next idea is the right for callers to be remembered. Now, in today's modern IVR systems, there is a wealth of data that we have about callers. We know everything about those callers by connecting to a CRM system or back-end customer databases. And we can do things like the example on the right. We know that if somebody has placed an order yesterday, there's a good chance that if they're calling today, they want to know about that order. So we can say, welcome back. I see you placed an order yesterday. Is that what you're calling about? Now, you're giving the caller control, as we talked about earlier, but you're using data to drive a very intelligent interaction that, again, is going to gain callers' trust. And right away, if that's what they're calling about, they can say yes. You might even be able to get more data about the order to look up a tracking number and tell them exactly where their package is and when it's expected to arrive. So there are opportunities here to personalize the call flow and, again, address the reason why we think callers might be calling in and gain their trust. And this added layer of intelligence driven by data results in a much improved caller experience. And as I think we all know, if you can improve callers' experience in the IVR, they'll play along, and it will lead to higher containment rates. So the goal here is to treat callers like a clerk in a store would. Another example is if I bought an expensive custom-tailored suit, and I spent a lot of money on that suit, if I came in to get it retailored a week later because I realized it didn't look quite right, if I see the same clerk I spoke with last time, a really good clerk is going to recognize me and probably even know my first name. And they're going to gain my trust. I'm going to feel very comfortable about that, and I'm going to be glad that I spent money in that store. And the same thing is true in the IVR. If we can please our callers, it will lead to higher containment rates. Now, the next idea is to treat callers like a human being. This may sound really obvious, but callers have the right to be treated like a human being. Now, there's a lot of research that's been done that shows that the rules that govern how humans talk to other humans, they also apply when humans talk to computers. And, just as if you talk to a friend or coworker and that person is always talking down to you and treating you like you're a child, or maybe they have this kind of fake smile all the time, or, they tell you, your friendship's very important to me. You might not believe them. Just like if an IVR does all those things and fakes the fact that it likes talking to you and says please, before every other word, and tells you your call is important to us, most likely people are going to think, my call is not important to this IVR. So the IVR should never talk down to callers or try to fake this saccharine sweetness that some IVRs have. And that comes down to the language you choose when you craft the prompts and also the way you coach your voice talent. You also don't want to use complicated language and industry jargon that people can't understand. That will turn people off right away. You do want to speak clearly and intelligently. You want to treat people like they're adults and be honest with them. No one wants to be treated like they're below somebody else, just like they don't want the IVR to talk down to you. So the goal here is to take advantage of the ways that humans communicate. We're not trying to fool people into thinking that they're talking to a live person, but we are trying to use the rules that we know work between humans and humans to make people interact well. And those same things, again, apply between humans and computers. And we can not try to fake it and get the IVR to pretend it's a human being, but it can take advantage of those rules. Now, the seventh right here is the right to not have to repeat myself. Now, there's no reason why a caller should have to give their account number in an IVR system, go through, answer a whole bunch of questions, play along, and then be transferred to a rep and have the rep say, okay, before we start, what's your account number? There's just no reason why a caller should have to go through that interaction. There's plenty of technology available, whether it's CTI, screen pops that can actually pop information about what happened in the call onto the agent desktop, or whispers, where it actually whispers something in the agent's ear about what happened. With screen pops, it's not only account information that can be passed. If you imagine that a caller went through a tech support flow and answered a whole bunch of questions about, why let's say their satellite box wasn't working, maybe the IVR actually leads them through some troubleshooting steps to try to reset it and, change a few settings and try to get it to work. And even if that doesn't work, it's not all lost. We can send them over to an agent, pop the 5 things we already tried on the agent's desktop, and have them start with step number 6. If we can do those things, again, we're gaining callers' trust, and even though we didn't automate the full call, we've shaved a lot of time off the agent interaction, which saves money for the call center and can reduce hold times as well. So, when you're transferring from one IVR to another, you need to be aware of data collected as well. It's not just when transferring from one IVR to an agent. There are plenty of opportunities to make sure that the IVR has this seamless interaction where, if the first IVR you're in collected 10 pieces of information, maybe you only need to do a couple things in the second IVR, and it knows all the things that you've already done. So we want to keep this thing seamless from start to finish. The caller experience does not end with the first IVR or even with the second or third. It ends with hanging up the call, and we want to make sure that the entire interaction is seamless from start to finish. Now, the next idea is the right to be transferred to the right place the first time, rather. We don't want to have an experience where callers are bounced from one agent to another all over the call center. Now, to get this right, the first thing we need to do when we're designing a new system is to agree with the decision makers on the agent skills that are available and the destinations where we'll be routing people. So, if there are 5 different things that agents can do, there's 5 different groups of agents with 5 different skills, then, only once we understand what those skills are and what the differences are between those 5 skills, can we then come in and correctly create and map questions in the IVR to each of those locations. So we really need to work to understand what the different skills are and what the differences are before we can correctly create questions that will get people to the right place. Now, I worked on a redesign of an application recently. It was actually a touch-tone application where callers really weren't playing along. They weren't saying an automation to answer the questions. And even if they did, they all seemed to end up at the same agent skill. And it was causing problems in the call center, and nothing was really working. They weren't getting any benefit out of that touch-tone system. And we found that they had 8 or 9 pages of call flows to get people to the right place. But when we sat down and talked with the decision makers, and we got everybody in the room, we realized that there were only a handful of places where people could be transferred to. There were only a handful of distinct agent skills that people could be transferred to. And we were able to cut the call flow to 4 pages of questions. And the result was people played along because they didn't feel like they were trapped in this automation. And the questions were very clear. It was very obvious how to answer each question. And ultimately, we got people to the right place the first time. Now, the idea of IVR transfers and misdirects is something that a lot of call centers overlook. A lot of times the managers are focused on containment rates because that affects their bottom line immediately, but they don't think about the fact that transferring from one person to another also increases agent talk time and wastes a ton of time for everyone, for the agents and for the callers, and it costs a ton of money for the call center to bounce callers around, and it ruins your customer experience as well. So the idea is to really understand the problem up front, understand the places where people can be transferred to, and make sure that you craft your IVR system very carefully to get people to those right places, and ask very clear and concise questions and get people to the right place the first time. Now the next item here is the right to have callers' time respected. A caller's time is very valuable, and callers, of course, will be the first ones to tell you that their time is valuable, and they don't want to be stuck in an IVR system that wastes their time and they end up with nothing to show for it at the end. So you need to consider the caller experience when you're talking about what an acceptable hold time is, and this is different for every problem you're trying to solve. Different calling populations and people with different mindsets when they call in will have a different acceptable hold time, a different time that's acceptable for them. If they're waiting for a very specialized representative and they know that when they finally get to that person, that representative is going to handle their very difficult tech support problem, maybe they're willing to wait a little longer than somebody who just has a basic problem about their bill. Now, you also want to avoid a large number of steps or questions in the IVR interaction, and those things can snowball. So you might have an IVR that's working pretty well, and a marketing person comes in or a business owner comes in and says, we really just need to add these 3 questions to the interaction. And you might look at those 3 questions and think, okay, they're not bad. That's pretty easy. We can craft those carefully and get them recorded, and they'll sound great. It'll be consistent with the rest of the application. That same voice talent's available. You might think it's not a big deal. But unless you step back and think about the entire IVR interaction they're going to have to go through after those 3 steps are added, and you think about the longest possible path they could take through the interaction, you don't know whether that's going to be acceptable or not until you do that. The same thing is true with legal and marketing messages. Legal departments get a bad rap, but often, if you meet with them and explain to them what you're trying to accomplish, sometimes there's a middle ground, where they can actually cut that message down or maybe play it somewhere else in the call flow. And there are ways to not waste a caller's time with some long legal disclaimer that means nothing to them. And getting back to hold times, if you let callers know that hold times are going to be long, you can give them options. And again, you're giving control back to the user. You might give them the option to leave a message and have an agent call them back when things are a little less busy in the call center. And callers are often willing to do that. You might even be able to ask a caller when they'd like a call back. If it could be as soon as the agent becomes available, or they might say, call me back at 6 p.m. So again, when you add to an existing call flow, you reevaluate how it's going to affect the overall experience. Or when you're designing a new flow, make sure you understand what that whole experience is like. Walk through the call flow as if you're the caller, and if it feels like it's something that would frustrate you, then obviously it's going to frustrate your callers as well. So if you can avoid these painfully long interactions and keep your callers engaged, again, you'll have higher containment rates. Now the final right here is the right to be listened to. And the idea here is that callers will provide you all the information you need about how to improve your IVR. And there's always room to improve an IVR. Even the best designed IVR that you spent months and months creating, there's always some room to make it just a little bit better. Now the first thing that usually comes to mind for customers is a post-call survey. A lot of customers say, I want to know how callers are doing in the IVR, how do they like it. So let's put 10 survey questions in there. And so the first point is it doesn't have to be 10 questions. A well-worded, one single well-worded question can be enough. You might ask callers, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this experience to a friend or family member? And, based on their answer, you then can even follow up. If they give a low score, from 1 to 6, you can have a recording where you ask them in a few words, just tell me what we could have done to improve the experience for you. Then you can even send that out through an automated process to have that transcribed. And at the end of the week, you've got thousands of lines in a spreadsheet with people answering that question, and you've got tons of data about how to improve your IVR. So surveys can be a really good thing. But the other point here is that they're not the only thing. In fact, I think it's almost more important to analyze the usage data that you have. So most IVR vendors today can provide pretty detailed reporting data about how people are using the IVR. And so we call this the quantitative part of analyzing an IVR. And when you do quantitative analysis, you're looking at the numbers. You're looking at how many people used different parts of the IVR, how many people answered yes to a certain question, and you're also looking at how many people had trouble in a certain place. And you can find out very quickly, almost in an automated way, you can find out where to focus your efforts based on where the most number of errors are occurring, or the largest percentage of errors are occurring. Now, once you have that quantitative data and you know where to focus your efforts, you can then use qualitative data, which comes from end-to-end call recordings, where you can hear callers interacting with the IVR. You hear both sides of the conversation, and you can very quickly find out where people are stumbling and what you might be able to do to improve that IVR, whether it's something simple like adding a few synonyms to the grammar, or rewording a prompt, or even changing the order of a call flow. A lot of times you can listen to a few calls and gain insight right away into the kinds of things you can improve. So again, the goal here is to understand how your IVR is working, not only through surveys, but also through analysis of the data that's available, and through analysis of qualitative data in the form of recordings, where you can be willing and able to make changes. The important thing to remember here is that there is always room to improve your IVR, and you need to have a process in place once it's deployed to find out where the improvement can be made and be able to make those changes quickly and then observe the results. So when you put all these things together, you can truly serve your customers better and serve them a better caller experience. And I'm sure as I went through this, taken one at a time, these things are pretty obvious. I mean, treating people like a human being, giving people control, not wasting their time. These are all obvious concepts, but it's amazing how many people kind of lose sight of this as soon as they start designing an IVR, and they think, all I want to do is contain callers, so I need to make it as tough as possible to get to an agent. I need to ask as many questions as possible in the IVR so the agent doesn't have to ask them. And people lose sight of the basics of what make people want to interact with human beings or with computers. So, if you truly design your IVR and your solutions with the caller in mind, and always treat callers as you would want to be treated, you can gain callers' trust. I've mentioned this a number of times here today. I really feel that the main thing here is to get people to trust the IVR, get them to realize they have a choice whether or not to use the IVR, and they should decide that they do want to use it if it can handle their task and if they feel that it's going to be faster for them than talking to an agent. I'm happy to use an automated system if I know it's going to be able to help me. So if we can reduce caller frustration across the board, we're going to increase customer satisfaction. And if you can make customers happy and increase their satisfaction, it's going to lead to higher containment rates. One thing I like to make very clear to my customers is that these two concepts are not mutually exclusive. You can make callers happy and have high containment rates. In fact, I feel you need to make customers happy in order to have high containment rates. And a lot of customers, believe it or not, feel the opposite. They feel that customer satisfaction isn't really all that important as long as they're automating a lot of calls. And automating a call doesn't just mean having a caller hang up without getting to an agent. It actually means letting a customer accomplish what they called in to do. And the final thing I want to leave everybody with is that this technology, which has come a long way and is very fancy, we have speech recognition where we used to have touch tone. Now we even have speech recognition that can recognize just about anything you say. People can call in and just kind of start telling you what they're calling about, and the IVR can figure it out and get you to the right place. All of this technology is only useful if you implement it in a thoughtful way and put your callers first and understand why they're calling in, what's their mindset, and how can we build a system that's going to make their lives easier and not get in their way. And if we follow all these rules, I believe we'll have happier callers across the board. So thank you very much, and I will leave you with that.